I want to welcome everybody to this episode of Trauma Rock Stars. I want to introduce you to this badass woman. She was a former attorney who actually has won the governor's award. She's a mom of three boys. And she's a best-selling author, which I cannot wait to dig more deep into that and tell you more about that. And you're also an advocate and you speak for mental health in general, but specifically for women and everything we go through. So thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited. Tell us a little bit about you, and before we get into like the real fun stuff, like I know a little bit about your history, if you want to share that with everybody and how you became this amazing gift to the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tracy, for having me on your show. It's such an honor to be here and to share my story in a way that resonates with other women.
Yeah.
So, what's interesting is that my life was going one way, and then like with all of us, all of a sudden it went this complete opposite way where, it's like I did all the right things. I was in high school, a three-sport athlete, traveled the world, went to undergrad, studied global politics, went to law school, and a little bit before law school, I was at the prosecutor's office. I was at victim assistance. I was
Mhm.
an advocate on the domestic violence and sexual assault team for many years. And it was while I was at the prosecutor's office where I was nominated by my peers and won the
Mhm.
governor's award for my work.
Which is to be nominated and awarded that by your peers is probably one of the most rewarding and like
It was
special
very,
moments.
it was incredible. And, this was 20 plus years ago.
Mhm.
And this award, I don't know if they have it in your state, but in my state, it's given to one person every year.
Mhm.
So it's a big deal.
The big deal.
It's a big deal. And I loved what I did. I was on one of the teams where we were the first in the state when a lot of the states were going to assault for's mandatory arrests. And so it was all this cutting edge, new law, new area. And so my team, we were also training law enforcement at the time, like how to respond to domestics, always have an advocate there, because what was really hard was prosecuting these cases because
Mhm.
so many times the victim would recant the whole story. And so here I am doing all this work, and I did not know I was in an abusive marriage because 20 plus years ago, the conversation was on physical violence.
Yeah, very different.
It was a very different conversation. And here again, I'm at the prosecutor's office, I'm with law enforcement, and it's, were you hit? Were you touched? Did you break a bone? It was not on emotional and psychological abuse. It was not on coercive control. And so for many years, my marriage, there was something not quite right. I couldn't name it, and I couldn't call it abuse
Yeah.
because I wasn't being physically, but it was so off and I couldn't figure it out. And then that one led to another marriage, and it was the same thing. I'm like, what is going on here? We weren't talking about this. Is before we started talking about narcissistic abuse, coercive control, emotional and psychological abuse.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until that marriage ended in physical violence
Mm.
where I was actually the one set up and arrested, to where I had lost everything. And I just found myself, I lost my eyesight too. And I was at my sister's house just crying out to God, whoever, how did
Mhm.
my life go so terribly wrong? How did
Mhm.
I get here? And how do I return to who I am? I mean, I'm educated. I've
Yeah.
traveled the world, won awards, I'm an attorney. How did I not know? How did I not connect all these dots?
Do
And
you
so
think because back then it was lack of education. Like people just weren't talking about mental health and abuse, like verbal and emotional and spiritual abuse, you know?
Yes,
And if
financial.
you did, people thought you were nuts.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of women, we internalize a lot of that. And
Mhm,
so we think there's something wrong with us.
mhm,
Okay, well maybe it's me. Maybe we need to go to therapy. Maybe we need to do all of these things. But when you're with a partner who refuses to do those things, it even makes it more confusing. And so for me, coming to this place of having lost everything, I still didn't have a label for everything I went, and that's what, what we do is we before we even see the patterns, we create a story. But when you're stuck in this, like, cognitive dissonance, this fog,
mhm,
it's like you can't even see clearly because you don't
mhm.
even know what you just suffered through.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was figuring out what I went through,
Mhm,
who my ex-husbands were,
mm,
and how the over time, how the trauma bond formed, how what cognitive dissonance is, what is a narcissist, what is narcissistic abuse. And so for me, and what a lot of victims and survivors do is we need to figure out what happened to us. How
mhm,
did we get here?
mhm,
And so I just took this huge deep dive into the patterns because I started
mhm.
to notice the patterns. And when you're inside those relationships and when you're inside the abuse, you can't see the patterns because you're just too engulfed in it.
And being a mother,
Yeah.
that adds a whole more complicated layer to it.
Yeah. Well, and it's like so many women we say, well, we don't want to leave because we don't want to break up our family. But at the same time, it's like, well, this isn't even healthy for the children.
Yeah, because it's learned behavior.
Yeah. And that's what they do. They model our behavior.
Yeah.
And so for me, it actually got to a place where I just kind of felt like I was on this pendulum between my two ex-husbands with no agency over my own life. And I'm still trying to figure out what happened. Who are these men? How did everything go so wrong? And then my first husband, he committed suicide. And
Were you guys still married?
no, no,
Okay.
we weren't married. He had remarried, but he used the courts for almost 6 years, and I
Mm,
call it weaponized legal. And so you are in the courts
yeah.
night and day. Like, why did my divorce take 4 years? Divorces don't take 4 years unless it's coercive control. You can't mediate them. They take forever. And he was trying to alienate the kids. It was, we were in court
Yeah.
all the time.
And you're an attorney.
Oh, yeah,
So
but I'm
you're
not
like,
gonna
I
get
should be able to get through this quick, done, easy, you know?
yeah, and that's the where the conversation is finally starting to go,
Mhm.
is to legal, because it's just another women or and this happens to men also, so, it's,
Yeah.
I primarily speak for women.
Right.
But it's huge in the courts. I went to court so often and it's just they're just spinning the stories, the narratives. And, I've talked to so many women who have lost their kids and the alienation,
Yeah.
everything. And it's like, I wouldn't have believed all of this was happening in the courts if it didn't happen to me, someone who understands the legal system,
The system, yeah.
the system. And here I was when I left my second husband between the 2 marriages, I was served with temporary custody papers, and I had just left Florida, came back to Oregon, and the same thing, like, I showed up to court, and he had no evidence, and he just started coming up with his own stories, and it was all believed by the court, and I had no say in anything. And at one point, he was even like, "Well, I'm afraid," and this is a father who never had
Yeah.
custody of his kids.
Right.
He did not he had a parenting plan. And so, he's up there and Stephanie's an alcoholic. Stephanie's going to kill. I'm afraid that she's going to kill our children. She calls
Mhm.
my office nonstop. And so it was just being re-victimized all over again, but also by the courts. And so this is a whole nother conversation that is finally
Yeah.
starting to happen. I'm finally seeing more people and more men and women share their experience of
Mm.
the courts. Yeah, it's a
It's
lot.
and I know you advocate for women mostly, but not all, but there is a lot of abusive women out there too. So I don't want anybody listening that might be listening to this and they might be thinking, oh my gosh, this could be my brother, the way his wife treats him, or, this is across the board with the legal system. And you didn't even go out unscathed what it
Oh,
did
no.
to you.
No, it was horrible. And like you said, I mean, women are narcissists as well. And
Yeah.
it's men lose their kids for very similar reasons.
Yeah. What was Stephanie, what was, cuz I know you said you had the 2, and how long did it take you before you're like, okay, I need to do something? Like, I guess you call it your aha moment, like how far after that second marriage did you start to think, we've got to do some change in here?
Yeah, when I left and I was at my sister's house, I was there for about 6 weeks healing.
Mhm.
I'd sunburned my eye and squinted my way to the eye doctor, and she said it looked like someone had taken sandpaper to both of my eyes and just destroyed my eyes. Yeah,
Holy cow.
yeah. There is a word for it. I can't remember what it is. I'd
Mhm.
never heard about it. And so it took.
Not scleroderma.
No, I
No.
feel like it started with a K, but
Oh, it's okay.
anyways, so I was healing at my sister's house, and it was there where I had this bathroom floor moment where I
Mm,
think a lot of us, we have this moment where,
yeah,
like, how I did everything right. Like, I followed all the rules. I went to college, I went to law school, I got married, I had kids. You're doing everything right, but it's like, how did I get here? And so for me, I knew I had a very powerful story. I was married to a covert narcissist for 14 years and 6 years of weaponized legal, and then he committed suicide. My first second husband, I was married to for I think we were together for 5 years total. But with him, it all happened in 2020. And so remember 2020, the whole world shut down. And so
yeah.
it was very confusing again because I was
Mhm.
like, oh, what is this really him, or is this the world being crazy? And so again, you live in this fog of you don't know which way is up or down or
Yeah,
left or right because the fog is so thick. And we call that fog cognitive dissonance, right? It's when your intellectual mind, your cognitive mind, your educated mind knows one thing, but then your subconscious mind, your heart, your emotions has a different voice. And so you're incoherent.
yeah.
And in that incoherence, that's where gaslighting lives. That's where
Mhm.
coercive control lives, manipulation, walking on eggshells, because you're trying to connect these two, but they're so far out of alignment that you just have no idea what's going on. And
Mhm.
so you can say intellectually, oh, this person's abusive, but in your heart, you're like, well, but are they?
It's
Did that
almost like your mind plays tricks on you.
It does, because 'cause you're
Yeah.
completely incoherent. You're not in full body alignment. And so for me, having that bathroom floor moment at my sister's house, I'm like, I needed to figure out how I got here. Like, why can I think rationally and logically, but yet I also have this what if? What if I just try a little harder? What if I
Mhm.
just endure a little longer? Maybe the man I fell in love with would return. But the thing is that we never the one that we attach to and formed the trauma bond with, that person's not real. And then you just go through the cycle of intermittent reinforcement of it's good, it's bad, it's good, it's bad. And that cycle solidifies the trauma bond. It makes it so much stronger.
Mhm.
And then in that gray area is where all the doubt, the gaslighting, like I said, everything
Yeah.
is there. And so I knew I had this story, but I also knew I needed to figure out how I got here because if I happened to me, and not that I'm like way up here, it's more like my background is in domestic violence. My background's in sexual assault. I'm an attorney. I know the system, but how did the system abuse me? And if it happened to me, then I know it is happening to a lot more women and men than we realize. And so I needed to come up with, like, map my way out of this so that I could give others the map.
I think it's really interesting that you called it a map because I wanted to ask you when you were having that moment on the bathroom floor, which we've all had at least a few times,
Yeah.
and everything. And I too got engaged and unengaged during the pandemic. So the unengaged part was the best. But when you're thinking that and you're like, I have to get this map out, with like to guide people out of this. What internal thoughts did you have of because you can't beat yourself up. You're a human. Just because you worked in the system, you're still, you're still a human. You're still a woman. You still want love. You still want this great relationship and this great partner and husband and everything. So what were the tools like, I guess, was it self-talk or that you gave yourself to not be so hard? Because we're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah, I think because I was an athlete, I didn't have a lot of the negative
Okay,
self-talk,
good.
because for me, I always had the positive self-talk, like, I was always an internal motivator,
Mhm,
well, I was a long distance runner, a distance swimmer, and so it was always like, "Okay, keep going, keep going, keep going."
mhm.
I am an endurance athlete, so
Yeah.
can endure marriages, but that's not a gift. It is in, as an athlete, and I
Mhm.
I even talk about it in my book. I have a chapter on persistence. Like, we know how to persist, but when you are trying to persist against a trauma bond, at some point, you have to stop, like, banging your head on the wall. They're not going to change.
What happened or when did you specifically change from, and this is something you and I talked about before, from the why me to the for me?
Yeah, so I was on the bathroom floor again, and it was in that intense moment of what happened where I I felt or heard that kind of still, quiet, intuitive voice, the one that if you've been in these marriages, it gets hidden and we stop listening to it because it's just their survival voice comes on. And it was in that moment where I heard, like, Stephanie, you are not seeing your story the right way. Like, you
Mhm.
not meant to be this supporting character in your story. And for both my marriages, I realized that I wasn't the star of my story. I had made them
Mm,
the star because when you're in these relationships, they demand so much of your time, your attention, your focus that slowly you don't even realize it, but your whole existence is consumed by them.
mhm.
And you
Put them
don't
on a pedestal.
yeah. And then you start to,
Yeah.
they rise up and you start to fall down. And it was in that moment where it was like, you're not broken. You are buried brilliance. You're a diamond. And so I started using the diamond metaphor because it's when you are raw and vulnerable and you don't know that you're a diamond because a forged diamond doesn't look anything like a brilliant,
Right,
polished cut diamond. It looks like
right.
a rock. And when you've just gone through the volcano, the fire, because you've just been forged and you're sitting there, you can't see the value and worth of who you are because it was all given away in order to survive.
Mhm,
You've abandoned, or I had abandoned all these parts of myself to survive and to get the person I fell in love with back.
mm,
And so feeling like this raw, exposed, vulnerable rock, because I did not feel like a diamond, but being reminded that I was a diamond. And so for me, it really started with, how did I get here? How did I go from traveling all over the world, getting full rides to undergrad and scholarships to law school, winning all these awards, to nothing? And so I had to start looking at my beliefs. Like, why did I keep abandoning myself? Why was I giving everything to these men? And, to go back a couple months prior to the bathroom floor, we had moved to Florida and we lived in this right on the Gulf.
Mhm.
It was beautiful, the mango tree and, all
Mhm.
the stuff. And we were hit by Hurricane Ian
Mm.
in 2022.
I was here.
Yeah, and our house was destroyed. We were
Were you
ready.
down in Cape Coral? I can't
Uh-huh.
that
Yep.
I remember you telling me that, yeah.
Right, the eye of the hurricane, like, right there.
Mhm.
And our house was completely destroyed. And again, we stayed like, "Oh, maybe we can fix it. Maybe we can rebuild it." And it wasn't until, FEMA's like, "No."
You're done, yeah.
Done. And so I had to look at my beliefs the same way. And so I started looking at them the way I went through my house after the hurricane. Is this mine? Because in the hurricane, you get a lot of stuff that isn't yours.
Yeah.
Your house as your stuff is floating down the neighborhood.
Mhm.
And so, is this mine? Do I like it? Who gave it to me? And do I want to keep it?
Mhm.
And so I stripped myself of all my beliefs. And then I had to re-ask myself, who am I? And just like our house, we took it down to the studs trying to save it.
Mm.
We did everything and it still had to be bulldozed. And I had to do that with my beliefs as well. I had to just take them all down and then completely bulldoze everything. And then
Mhm.
I had to say, who am I now?
Mhm.
And how do I become this diamond that I am? Because right now, it doesn't feel like a diamond. And so I use the metaphor of the jeweler. It's the diamond tear is the master diamond cutter, right? And he has to put on these, I think that they call it like a loop, I think,
Mhm.
or something. It's the eyeglasses that they wear.
Yeah.
And so to really scrutinize the diamond, and so I had to put on those like metaphorical glasses and I had to really look at the patterns in my life. Okay, here's the things with my first husband. Here's the things with my second husband. Why? And I can see more clearly now because everything is, in hindsight, it's easier to go back and look at it. But, with my first marriage, I was married to a covert narcissist and it's like ice cold. It's
Mm.
indifferent. They just don't care.
Yeah.
And so when you've been frozen for so long, when the malignant narcissist comes with his fire, it's easy to mistake that intensity for love, for heat,
Mhm.
but really it's just the polar opposite. And so for me, I have the jeweler's magnifying glass and I'm looking and if you hold a stone up to the light can't pass through. And so it's met with resistance, and that resistance will cast a shadow.
Interesting.
And so you can start to see the little cracks where light wants to come in. And that's kind of where we are in these bathroom floor moments, like little cracks. Things that have happened have cracked us open a little bit, and there's a little tiny piece of light that is trying to shine through to show us the truth of who we are. But for many of us, myself included, it felt safer to go back into the layers
Yeah.
and to finish cracking yourself open so that all the light could shine through. And so I just spent that whole year, it was about 18 months actually, rebuilding my identity, my patterns, my belief systems. Why
Mhm.
I believe these things. And I think that's one of the gifts of having these bathroom floor moments of leaving is that we can take a very hard look at who we are. And so
Ah.
it is very very hard because who wants to look at all of that
Yeah.
and then to cut off all the layers
Mm.
that make the raw diamond. But it's the only way that you become an actual diamond. You have to remove all the residue, and all that residue is the traumas, it's the stories we've told ourselves, it's the old identities that we had to take on to survive
Mhm.
those marriages. When you can step back and look that all the pressure and all the heat and everything you went through was only there to crystallize you, not to punish you.
Mhm.
And it wasn't because there was something wrong with you, because I think so many of us, we think, well, I'm so broken. I
Yeah.
can never be fixed. Well, what if we look at it differently? What if we say you were crystallized light and now we remove what you don't need so that you can shine the way you're meant to shine with all your brilliance? And that's why I say we're not broken, we're buried brilliance.
I love it. I've never heard it described like that, and I it's so powerful. When you look back at everything, and I wanna talk about the books and stuff. We'll get to that in a second because I wanna find out, like, where, when you started and all that. But when you look back at that those choices, you made. Where when you had to, like, dig deep, I want what tools did you use to do that worked and maybe what didn't work as well? And then also, can you like, where did that come from? Was it, like, stuff that you learned when you were growing up? Is it just you know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, I spent a lot of time there in silence and with myself. And things are beliefs are created through repetition over and over and over again until we believe it. And so for me, it was first, asking the questions and realizing that my exes were indeed narcissists, which is also interesting because it's like it seems to be the very hot topic. But and so they were. And so one of the first big questions was, well, how did I attract them into my life?
Yes. That's where I was going with the question.
And I've listened to so many of the leading people and they're like, well, they can charm anyone. Well, they're just charming. I'm like, no, it has to be deeper than that. It has to be so much deeper.
Yeah.
Well, and yes, I do get they're charming. They're very charming, and especially when if you've had two of them and two different ones, you can see the different types of charm. And so I remember asking my mom, I'm like, do we have narcissists in our family? Maybe it's like this generational thing, or because I would also hear so many people say, well, you had to have grown up in chaos. You were abused as a child, all these things. I'm like, oh, my parents are still married.
Yeah.
I came from a loving family.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, that's a myth. It's deeper. It's deeper than you growing up in chaos and you growing up in trauma and them being charismatic and charming. And so my mom told me that, yeah, she believed her father and her grandfather were narcissists. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, so that could make some sense. There's like a hereditary line somehow.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I'm like, "Well, but what is the wound behind all of this?" Because, we meet people at the level of wounds, but because I'm meeting this malignant narcissist, I'm not a malignant narcissist. So what is the wound that has attracted us to each other? And again, going deeper and deeper, for me, what I uncovered was I call it the mother wound. I'm not a psychiatrist, therapist, but I am pretty freaking smart and I can understand things pretty well. And I understand patterns and systems. And so, again, I went deeper with that. Like, what is the core of the mother wound? And it's attunement. And attunement is being seen, being acknowledged for who you are. Now, it doesn't mean that your parents didn't love you. It means attunement is when you can look into your child's soul and you can see them for who they are.
Mm.
They're allowed to be the fullness of who they are without being shamed. And so, yes, my parents are very loving. My parents were there. My parents were present, but they didn't see me. And that creates a whole wound of performance.
So, because you really felt like you weren't heard growing up as a
Yeah.
child.
Yeah. When you're not heard and seen and invalidated and acknowledged for who you are, it doesn't mean your parents were bad or wrong. It
Right.
just means they couldn't see you the way you needed to be seen. And
Mhm.
so, as small children, what happens then is that we start performing
Mm.
to be seen. And so, when you have a lifetime of that, here I am, a very intuitive child, a very empathic child, a child who can read the room and know how to perform to be seen, straight A student,
Yeah.
scholar athlete. And so you learn and you adapt and you enter, I call it contracts because I was did contract law for a while, but you enter into these contracts with yourself. And that's kind of what a belief is. It's a
Yeah.
contract with yourself that you knowingly or unknowingly made, because it could be made just through habit.
Yeah.
And so when you take someone like that, and then you bring in another person, let's say a malignant narcissist with their own wound, but in the beginning, they make you feel seen, heard, validated. And so you feel like you finally have found your soulmate, because
Mhm.
finally there's one person in the world who finally sees you and
Mhm.
gets you for who you are. But it's that attunement in the beginning that creates the catalyst for the trauma bond and everything else that follows. And so that's how deep I went. And when I say I created the map, it's my map is the books.
Yeah.
It's how I went that deep and how I had to rewrite my identity. Not rewrite it as a completely different person, because we're always there. The raw diamond. It's I need to get rid of all these old patterns that created the resistance and the shadow in the first place, so that the brilliance that was always there can be revealed. So it's almost like a series of self-abandonment. And so if you're this small child who is not seen and heard the way you need to be seen and heard, and you're
Mhm.
silenced, then you have to go back and find all those places in your life where you abandoned yourself to be seen.
Yeah. So it's so funny how you said that because you actually do end up abandoning yourself in the process.
You do, and we don't realize it.
Mhm.
That's where I think a lot of what I see and hear, it's so focused on the narcissist, is so focused on the abuse, where really we need to take that focus and put it back on ourselves. And I'm not saying you did anything wrong or
Right.
you deserve this. I am not saying that. The pattern.
Mhm.
And when you can look at it, when you can remove yourself and see the pattern, then you can rewrite your identity.
Mhm.
Again, you're not becoming someone new, you're becoming someone more true, turning to who you always were before you started abandoning yourself.
Yeah. Because I mean, you can only work on you. You can't change somebody else.
No.
So, no matter what situation you're in, you need to look in the mirror because, like, life is a mirror reflected back at us. Like you said, you were attracting people for a reason. I think this is such a good segue that you were talking about because you were talking about the map and everything. Which do you want to talk about first? You want to talk about Magnificent Me
Yeah.
first?
Yes, I would love to. I'll be right here. So on it, it is the labyrinth and the mirror, like you said,
And the diamond.
and the diamond. So, like, when you are in the relationships and it feels like you're going down this spiral maze, like,
Mhm.
no matter which way you turn, it's just more of the same horrible nightmares. And so you feel, or at least I felt, trapped and stuck and just running in dead ends and
Mhm.
not able to see. where I was going because it is so confusing. But it has to be confusing because otherwise, if it wasn't confusing, we would leave.
Right.
But when we're trying to figure it out and trying to navigate and trying to, where's the man I fell in love with? And again, it's like all our focus is on them. It's like our perception has been hijacked. And so
Yeah.
we can't see clearly. And so what I realized was as I started working through everything was that it wasn't a maze because a maze is designed to keep you trapped, but a labyrinth is created to bring you back to center. And
Mhm.
when you can step away enough and give enough distance and see that you were really inside a labyrinth and it always was leading you back to you, to the true mirror of who you are, then you can look at it, everything you went through, with a completely different lens and perception
Mhm.
because you're seeing it from a different perspective. And so I wrote Magnificent Me not from the wound, but from standing away and seeing it as a maze. The first thing that I did was reveal my true identity. And so
Mhm.
it's a book on identity creation. And I call it Magnificent Me because you don't feel magnificent. You don't feel like this bright, brilliant diamond, but you are. And we can take everything that we went through and we can create something truly magnificent from it. And so I wrote it kind of like a contract. So there's a lot of little contract law things in there. And so the first part is ready, willing, and able. And
Mhm.
contract law, that's tender. And tender means that you are able to perform the contract. And so I look at it as well, you have to have that desire. And for some of us, myself included, I had to come to a place where staying the same wasn't an option. I had lost
Mhm.
everything.
Literally.
Everything. The
Yeah.
hurricane, the exes, everything. I lost everything. And so for me, it wasn't an option to stay the same. I was not going to end up with like another narcissist. I was not going to walk down. I'd had enough. And so you have to come to a point where you are willing and you are ready to do whatever it takes to change the patterns in your life. And then you form a new contract with yourself because that's what it really is. And so I look at how our thoughts and our imagination create our reality, create
Mhm.
who we are.
100%.
And then in contract law, you have to have consideration. Consideration is nothing's for free. It's the price. And in this formula, the price is dying to the old self, the old identity, and rising in the new identity, whatever that is to you, whatever that means
Mhm.
to you. And so then I look at the law of self definition. Like, how do you want to define yourself now? Because we don't have to be defined by everything that we went through, and we get to decide.
Yes.
And so even like I don't even call myself a survivor. I'm like, no, I am just the most magnificent version of me. I'm more than a survivor.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I'm the diamond. We're the diamonds.
Yeah.
And we get to decide our cut, our clarity, our color, and our carrot based on
Mhm.
everything we went through. And so then I talk about other things like I have the book on I mean the chapter on persistence, like why did we persist? Why did we
Mhm.
stay? And for me, it's a very personal, intimate story because I have to share everything that I went through.
Yeah.
And so it's a very I've had so many people like, "Stephanie, I thought I would just kind of skim it real quick." And then
So
2 days later, I finished it, and now I'm gonna go back and read it again. It's very deep because you have to get deep with yourself. And if you can't get deep with yourself, maybe you're not ready to tender, but you have to be able to go to those places within you.
mm,
You were locked away to create this higher version of you. And again, we're not creating someone new, we're revealing, just like
mm,
the diamond, we're revealing who you are,
mhm.
always been. And so I've already read it a couple times, even though I wrote it. I think it's really good.
I think, I can like, we don't wanna give it away because we want people to read it, but I think and this is just from my personal experience, tell me if you've felt this at all. Because when I was going back, during the pandemic and reevaluating my past partners, husband, whatever, and I looked back and, totally understand the choices I made now crystal clear like a diamond now, but I had to really like I was kind of surprised, but I had to kind of go back and forgive myself because I'm like, I'm not that I'm better than anybody, but I, I knew better. I just didn't have the tools I needed to really see that and put that out into the universe and the world and whatever. And I really had to do a lot of for personal forgiving and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I look at healing and rewriting our stories like a spiral,
Yeah.
and even life like a spiral. And so we have these versions of ourself that now we can see with a greater awareness and a higher perception. But at the moment when we were in that moment, when we made these choices or we abandoned ourselves in that particular moment, we kind of become echoes. And so for me, I had to go back to all those echoes. And it wasn't like I was like, oh, and this time, it was just whatever came up. Oh my
Mhm.
god, I remember that time that why did I do that? Why did I beg him to stay when I knew he was horrible? Why did I do that? Why did I keep taking him back after I left so many times? And so those moments kind of became echoes in the spiral. And
Mhm.
so for me going back, and again, I call it the attunement, it's I had to see that version of me and I had to acknowledge her and I had to release her. Whether that is forgiveness or not, I don't know. And so in my book, I actually have a chapter and I call it revision. And so I would go and revise that moment and free that echo by seeing and acknowledging her. And so I did that. But forgiveness, what I believe it is, forgiveness is it's a capacity. And when you are in the relationship and when you are fresh out of the relationship, or not even fresh out, it could even be years. There's no requirement that you have to forgive. And for many of us, it and as you free the echoes and as you heal and ascend, I guess, in awareness, and as your
Mhm.
perception expands, then your capacity expands as well because you're expanding up and out.
Mhm.
And until you have the capacity to even choose to forgive or not, that is your own choice. Oh, I see it. Especially because there's been so much religious abuse around forgiveness. And it's
Oh, yeah.
because so many of us, we are kind thing people and we forgive easily. And so when I reached a level of capacity where I could look back on my marriages and at my ex-husbands and I could see them not from a reactive place, but I could see them as a pattern. I say it because as a pattern because it depersonalizes it. It's not personal. And when you can look back at the structure, at the path you walked, at the architecture of who you are,
Mhm.
and you can have compassion and reverence for the design, then maybe I have forgiven them. But it wasn't until I came to that place because I can see it from such a higher perception perspective. But when I was in the middle of it, no, I hated them both because I
Yeah.
didn't have the level of awareness nor the capacity. And that's why I call it a capacity. Forgiveness is about capacity.
I
It's
love
not
that look on it because then you decide like how big you want that capacity to be, and at the end of the day, forgive or don't forgive, it's up to you, but if you do, you're forgiving for yourself, not
Yep.
for them, you know? you're not letting them off the hook.
No, no.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it's release the echoes and don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Release them. And at some point, if you have the greater capacity and you want to forgive,
Mhm.
yes. And if you have the greater capacity and you don't want to forgive, don't forgive.
Right. It's your journey.
It's yours.
Yeah.
But I know for me, after all the work I did and everything I went through, I was able to stand in the center of the diamond after it was cut and polished and clear and clean and radiant and vibrant. And I could see the light pass through. And
Mhm.
this time it refracted and reflected and created this hologram of colors. And so I'm standing in a prism of light. And it was only then that I could look at the whole architecture of everything I walked through.
Wow.
And it was only then where I had reverence for who I am
Mhm.
that I could have the capacity to forgive them. And that was a choice I made.
Did you self-publish?
I did. Yes,
So it's available on Amazon
it is. Yes.
and your website.
Yes.
I love the name of your website. Where did you get that?
Oh, okay. I have to give you the new one. So,
Oh, okay. Is there a new one? Okay. It's not
yeah,
the
it's just
right.
my name. Yeah. So, rewrite the fairy tale. I mentioned it in my book, and actually, the publisher forgot to include the section that the other website isn't completely finished. But I came up with rewrite the fairy tale because in both my marriages, it felt like a fairy tale until it didn't.
Yeah. Till they sucked you in and
Yeah, and you
yeah.
were sucked into a nightmare, not a
Yeah.
fairy tale. And so rewrite the fairy tale is it's choosing and it's rewriting our identity.
Mhm.
We are and rewriting what the fairy tale is. This is probably off topic, but I grew up around Disney and all the Disney shows, and it's like they
Mhm.
look at all of them. It's all like the woman is abandoning herself
Yeah.
and the guy's a narcissist. That's the fairy tale we're sold. But it's time to rewrite that fairy tale. It's
But
actually
that's not reality.
it's not, and it's horrible. It's actually the title of one of my books I'm writing also. So there's about 5 or 6 books that I'm working on right now.
Of course you are.
It's the map. We need the full map, right? So the
Yeah.
one that I'm doing right now is called When You Love a Narcissist: Awakening Perception, and I was blind, but now I see.
Mhm.
And this is the one on attunement, the mother wound, and self-abandonment. So I'm
Mm.
writing that one right now, and then the other one I'm kind of simultaneously writing is the diamond initiation,
Mm.
so metaphor. And rewrite the fairy tale is looking at generational patterns
Gotcha.
of where the feminine was
Mhm.
portrayed with a wounded masculine and how it created all of this.
Well, Stephanie, this just flew by. Oh my gosh, it just goes so fast. This has been to hear the whole story. And like I said, I'll include everything in the show notes. And people need to read your book because I love how just a couple of the chapters you talked about sound amazing and your journey. And I love how people can't beat themselves up. You came from an amazing family. You have your own amazing family. You're, very well educated. You've got so much experience and knowledge to bring to the world. So no matter where you are, don't beat yourself up like this. This happens to everybody. People just, it's about changing, I guess, your mind frame and I love the title Magnificent Me, and you are a shiny diamond. Like, this has been such a great conversation. I think you're going to inspire so many women listening to this. And I really hope, I can't wait to see the next book that you have coming out and your journey and everything. It's so exciting.
Yes, me too, and thank you. I'm excited for you to read it as well and for all
Yeah.
the listeners because we make healing more complicated than it needs to be. There's no reason why we need to be in therapy for years.
No, exactly. I agree.
I wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and it's like, and to remind you that there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
You've been programmed and conditioned,
Right.
and you can change that.
And you give the tools,
Do.
of what you personally been through, how you did it, and guiding people to their own discovering their own magnificent diamond shiny self. That's
Yes, yes.
awesome. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, and I'm just so excited you're now part of the Trauma Rockstar family, and I can't wait. I'm gonna have you on for your next book.
Woohoo.
Woohoo. Thanks so much, Stephanie. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. You too, Tracy.
Thanks. The content on this podcast revolves around personal life experiences and is meant to serve as a learning tool. I am not a certified therapist or medical expert. This podcast doesn't offer medical, psychological, or professional advice. If you're curious about your mental or physical well being, feel free to reach out to a licensed healthcare professional for assistance.